So a priest, a minister, and a rabbi walk into a bar. The bartender takes one look at them and says, "What is this, some kind of joke?" It's funny because we all know that the three of them usually only show up together in jokes. Maybe at an interfaith council meeting, likely out of a sense of obligation. But to imagine these three sitting down together on their free time to do something enjoyable, the instant you hear that roll call, you know it is the setup of a joke. But Scripture gives us even more outrageous examples of collaboration, and it's not meant as a joke. Consider this poetry from Isaiah, the 11th chapter. "The wolf shall lie down with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put its hand on the adder's den. They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea." I don't know about you, but this passage does not make me laugh. If anything, it makes me want to cry. But I don't think the prophet intended to make anyone laugh or cry. I think the intention here was to make people dream, to dream big, God-sized dreams of a world where such things are possible. Not literally, of course. Only in the metaphors of a poem will carnivores become herbivores. And if you have ever seen a dog eat grass, you know this is not a good idea. No, the prophet doesn't actually envision a world where wild animals will rethink their diets. They have no capacity to do so intellectually or physiologically. However, we as humans have all the capacity of our fabulous brains to rethink how we live in this world, and rethink it we must. This poem calls us to imagine living as God intended for us to live, in such a way that all of humanity could flourish, but no one at the expense of another. In a just and peaceful world, no one should live in fear of predatory human behaviors like exploitation, discrimination, or violence of any kind. Everything we do should be an act of blessing for all of humanity and for all of creation. The trouble is, just about every system we have in place, from the way we get our food to the way we live and move in the world, is exploitative of both people and planet. And disrupting every system we've got, well, it might actually be easier to convince a lion to ignore the cow and eat the hay instead. But seriously, no joke, building this kind of world is God's will. And that's why it was Jesus' life work. And as his followers, it becomes our mission as well. Our conference-wide vision statement even names it: following Jesus, thriving in community, and healing the world. Making the world a safe place where everyone in the community, both the local community and the global community, can thrive. It's a daunting task though, isn't it? How do we even begin to heal the brokenness of the world, especially when we ourselves might feel a little unsturdy? Even those of us with wonderfully charmed lives experience pain when we notice how much suffering exists in the world. It doesn't feel right, because it isn't. God made us for relationship, giving us hearts to care for each other. This is the God-given gift of compassion, which makes us fully human. Compassion. Com is with, passion means feeling, so compassion is the ability to feel something with someone else. Their pain is no longer only theirs. We feel it too when we have compassion. Compassion hurts, and it can wear us out. People in the caring professions often experience something we call compassion fatigue, but it can happen to anyone. We see either firsthand or in reports from around the world so much pain, and it's too much to handle. We are built to feel things together, even pain, but maybe in the context of one village, not the pain of the entire world. When it's too much to bear, we may become numb. Maybe we stop seeing it, either choosing to look away or by dehumanizing the ones who are suffering. We tell ourselves those people aren't like us, they've made some bad choices, they're in the wrong tribe, whatever we need to tell ourselves so the pain will not consume us. We can't feel the pain of the entire world without becoming broken ourselves. The problem is, once we give ourselves permission not to notice everything, sometimes we stop noticing anything. We could risk becoming callous, and in so doing, we might even become complicit with those doing harm. Maybe we just don't want to consider the impact of corporations who help some of us to live better while driving many others into unspeakable poverty. Maybe we don't really want to know what the conditions are like for the workers who make our clothing, the laborers who harvest our produce, or even the animals we consume. We certainly don't like to think about the impact any of this has on our planet. It is easy to turn a blind eye, and that's intentional. If we knew, it would break our hearts and we might stop playing our roles as consumers. But the truth is, we must eat, we must be clothed, but must it be at the expense of others' well-being? What would it take to heal this broken world? I am convinced that it begins by cultivating compassion, seeking to learn what others feel, and allowing ourselves to feel it too, so we can be stirred from complacency into healing action. And this starts by taking a good, hard look at the world. So I just listened to the story of someone who was able to do this in a very literal way. Her name is Kayla Barron, and she is an astronaut. In an interview with the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, Ms. Barron described seeing the Earth from outer space and being filled with an overwhelming sense of love for her home planet. She noticed that from space, none of the borders we construct were even visible. There were no lines dividing nations, states, counties, cities, or neighborhoods. There was just one gorgeous planet, our collective home. The astronaut was overcome with the desire to care for the Earth and for everything on it, and she returned to Earth with that vision. But how? How can one person care for everything on Earth? Well, we start by looking at what is before us, really noticing it and cultivating compassion for it, no matter how small. I saw that happen just last Sunday here in church. A hummingbird had flown in through the open door, and it flew right up the stairwell into the social hall, where it was confused by so many windows, all false promises of escape. That poor thing flew around for nearly an hour, even flying here into the sanctuary at one point, perhaps lured by the floral colors of our stained glass window. For an hour the bird flew, and I wondered, how can we possibly save something that will not allow us to get near it? But then near the end of worship, right after the sharing of bread and cup, something incredible happened. The bird alighted into the hands of a woman seated in the very back of the church. Tenderly, she cupped it in her hand, and she walked outside, where the tiny creature rested for a moment in the flower bed before flying away to where it needed to be. It was the smallest act of compassion, but it made a huge difference in the life of that one bird. Small acts of compassion prepare us for larger acts of compassion as we learn to care for the bigger problems in the world. And I saw an example of this just last Saturday, the day before the hummingbird incident. I had attended a celebration of the undamming of the Klamath River, which had been dammed for about 100 years, preventing the salmon from reaching their spawning grounds and depriving the indigenous peoples of a critical food source. However, 25 years ago, a movement began to undam the river, and after all these years, decades, it finally happened. 4 dams were removed, and the river is able to run more freely. A collaboration of tribal members and ecologists are working to restore the land. Tribal members will finally have access to their sacred places, and we can pray the salmon might even come home. We all sat under a great big tent filled with tribal members, ecologists, fisherfolk, members of the community who simply cared, and it struck me that there were an awful lot of different viewpoints in the room. Not all of them the same, but everyone was there to celebrate the realization of a common goal. One of the tribal members speaking even asked us to look around, saying, "These are your relatives. The river has called you and you came." Then she invited leaders from several other tribes to speak. And in a moment of pure beauty, several of them stood before us, hand in hand, transcending the boundaries of language, culture, and geography that had once separated their ancestors from one another. Everyone in the room bowed their heads in reverence as this woman sang us her great-grandmother's song in a language that few of us knew, but all of us understood. For listening, we were feeling together, experiencing compassion for the stories of suffering that had been shared in that space. It was good medicine, a balm of healing for a century of broken relationships with river, with salmon, and with humankind. And this large-scale triumph of healing was possible only because people worked together, crossing the boundaries that separated them. Tribes worked with other tribes, with government, with industry giants, with NGOs, with ecologists, with community leaders, with volunteers. The common cause had unified many hundreds of people who might not have identified as kin, but who were bound together by their commitment to something they all valued. Everyone felt something for the river, and in feeling it together, they began feeling for each other as well. Their compassion for the river led to compassion for each other. It reminded me of a teaching from the Psalms, how very good and pleasant it is when kindred live together in unity. For that is how we live into our identity as children of God. In order to live in unity and to cultivate true compassion for one another, we must be intentional about sharing experiences. Like God's vision for a healed world, we must be willing to come alongside each other despite our differences, working toward common goals. We do this when we volunteer at a food pantry, help with an after-school program, sing in a community choir, assemble disaster relief kits, or even just sit together at a potluck. However it looks, we must find ways to share this human experience so we might learn to feel true compassion for each other. So the altar call this week is this: find a way to share something with someone who might be different from you. You could share a volunteer experience. You could share a cup of coffee, a smile, or even a joke. In keeping with the theme of community service, here's one. A priest, a minister, and a rabbit walked into a blood drive. The person at the welcome table asked, "What are your blood types?" The priest said, "Type A." The minister said, "Type B." And the rabbit said, "I think I actually might be a typo."